The Friday afternoon sun cast long shadows across Naval Base Coronado as Colonel Bradford Vaughn sorted through range requests at his desk. 23 years in the Navy, the last 5 commanding the West Coast's premier special operations training facility, and he thought he'd seen every type of request imaginable. Then a small voice piped up from the other side of his desk, barely visible above the counter's edge. "Excuse me, sir. I'd like to reserve time on the precision shooting range, please." Vaughn looked up to find a girl who couldn't have been more than 12 swimming in an oversized pink hoodie, a worn leather notebook clutched in her small hands. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she stood with a posture that seemed oddly formal for a child. Around the office, several SEAL Team 3 operators glanced up from their paperwork, amusement flickering across weathered faces. "I think you're in the wrong place, sweetheart," Vaughn said, using the tone he reserved for his own grandchildren. "This is a military facility. The public range is about 10 miles north. They have a nice youth program on Saturdays." He turned back to his paperwork, expecting her to scurry off. Instead, she stepped closer, her gray eyes steady and serious in a way that made him pause. Naval Base Coronado represented the apex of American military training, home to the Naval Special Warfare Command and the legendary SEAL teams. The precision shooting range in particular was a temple to marksmanship, where operators honed skills that would save lives in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. Every inch of the facility breathed excellence, from the match-grade weapons to the computerized targeting systems that could simulate conditions from Arctic winds to desert heat. Colonel Bradford Vaughn had earned his place through decades of service, including 3 tours with SEAL Team 6 and enough classified operations to fill a Tom Clancy novel. At 51 with Silva, threading through his regulation haircut and laugh lines earned in better times, he ran the training facility with a mixture of strict discipline and paternal care for the operators under his command. He'd seen young men transformed into warriors, had written too many letters to grieving families, and thought he understood the weight of legacy. The office reflected military efficiency maps of training areas, photographs of graduating SEAL classes, a wall dedicated to the fallen. Among those photos, though Vaughn didn't immediately make the connection, was Lieutenant Nicole Morrison, her sharp eyes and slight smile captured during a deployment to Afghanistan. Angel shot. They'd called her a sniper so precise that enemy combatants had believed she was supernatural, a ghost who could reach out and touch them from impossible distances. Penelope Morrison stood in that office carrying weight no 12-year-old should bear. 2 years since the folded flag, the 21-gun salute, the hollow words about sacrifice and service. 2 years of living with her grandmother while the Navy figured out what to do with classified materials her mother had left behind, training manuals, ballistics tables, notebooks filled with techniques passed down through 5 generations of Morrison marksmen. Her great-great-grandfather had been a sharpshooter in World War I, using a Springfield rifle to protect advancing troops. Her great-grandfather had stalked through Pacific Islands with a modified M1 Garand. Her grandfather had spent months in Vietnamese highlands with a Remington 700. Her uncle had provided overwatch in Desert Storm. And her mother had refined all their knowledge into something approaching art, becoming the deadliest precision shooter in naval special warfare history. But Penelope was just a 12-year-old girl in a pink hoodie, standing in an office full of warriors who saw a child playing dress-up. She'd learned patience from her mother, along with trigger control, breath management, and the mathematics of ballistics. She'd learned that respect was earned through action, not words, and that the range would tell truths that no amount of talking could convey. The leather notebook in her hands contained her mother's final gift, handwritten notes on advanced marksmanship, coded in a way only another Morrison would understand. Pages of wind calculations, diagrams of body mechanics, philosophical observations about the relationship between shooter and target. Nicole had started teaching Penelope at age 4, not out of militarism, but out of love for a family tradition that connected generations through skill and discipline. "My name is Penelope Morrison," she said, her young voice carrying surprising authority. "My mother trained here, Lieutenant Nicole Morrison. She said if I ever needed to use the range, I should show you her notes, and you'd understand." The name hit the room like a flashbang. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Chief Petty Officer Martinez, who'd been cleaning his sidearm, looked up sharply. Master Chief Roberts, the range officer who'd served 2 tours with Nicole, set down his coffee with a hand that suddenly wasn't quite steady. Even the younger SEALs who'd never served with Angel Shot knew the name, knew the legend, knew the loss. Vaughn's expression shifted from patronizing amusement to something more complex. "Nicole Morrison was your mother." He studied Penelope's face, now seeing the resemblance, the same gray eyes that had tracked targets through scope glass, the same determined set to her jaw. "I'm sorry for your loss, truly. Your mother was exceptional. But this is still a military facility. We can't have children on the range no matter who their parents were." Penelope opened the notebook, revealing pages of technical drawings and calculations in her mother's precise handwriting. "She trained me every day since I was 4. She said the skills had to be passed on, that every generation of Morrisons had a duty to be ready." She flipped to a page covered in certification stamps. "I'm qualified on 7 different weapon systems. I hold 3 junior national records. I just need 10 minutes to show you." Laughter rippled through the office, not cruel, but disbelieving. Petty Officer Thompson, fresh from Bud S. training, shook his head. "Kid, I respect your mom's service, but this isn't a movie. Real shooting isn't—" "I know what real shooting is," Penelope interrupted quietly. "Mom showed me the videos from her helmet cam. I know what it costs. I also know what she could do, what she taught me to do. Just give me 10 minutes. Master Chief Roberts moved before Vaughn could respond. At 45, with more combat deployments than he cared to count, Roberts had developed an instinct for recognizing the real thing. Something about how Penelope stood, how her breathing remained steady, despite the room's skepticism, how her eyes tracked multiple targets without seeming to move at all, whispered of training that went beyond normal. "Colonel," Roberts said, "with respect, what's the harm supervised controlled conditions? If Nicole trained her, we should at least see what that means." He paused, then added quietly, "I was with her in Helmand when she made that 400-yard shot through a sandstorm. If she passed even a fraction of that ability to her daughter—" Vaughn wrestled with regulations, liability, and the sheer absurdity of the situation. But he also remembered Nicole Morrison, remembered reading her after-action reports that read like poetry, remembered the lives she'd saved with impossible shots. "Fine," he said finally. 10 minutes, Master Chief supervises Modified 22 only, and if anything seems unsafe, we shut it down immediately." The office emptied as word spread. SEALs who'd been heading home suddenly found reasons to visit the range. Within minutes, nearly 40 operators had gathered, some with phones ready to record what they assumed would be an amusing anecdote about a kid with delusions of grandeur. They didn't know they were about to witness history. The range at Coronado was a technological marvel, climate-controlled with electronic targeting systems that could measure groups down to fractions of an inch. Master Chief Roberts led Penelope through the safety protocols, noting how she checked the modified Mark 22 rifle with movements so automatic they seemed programmed into her muscle memory. She examined the weapon with the same focus a surgeon might show with a scalpel, her small hands moving with surprising authority. "Magazine," she said quietly, and Roberts handed her the ammunition. She loaded it with economical movements, no wasted motion, no hesitation. Around them, the gathered SEALs watched with expressions ranging from amusement to curiosity. Someone had set up a basic target at 25 yards, child's play for operators who regularly engaged targets at 10 times that distance. Penelope took her position at the firing line, and the transformation was immediate. The 12-year-old girl in the pink hoodie disappeared, replaced by something that made Roberts take an involuntary step back. Her stance was textbook perfect, but more than that, it was identical to her mother's, down to the slight cant of her head and the way she indexed her trigger finger along the receiver. "Hot range," Roberts announced, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty now. Penelope's first shot cracked through the air, and the electronic display showed a perfect center hit. Before anyone could comment, she fired 9 more times in steady succession, each shot paced with metronomic precision. The display showed what looked like a single whole 10 shots so tightly grouped that they'd created one ragged perforation exactly in the center of the target. "Move it to 50," someone called out, voice no longer carrying any mockery. The target shifted back. Penelope adjusted her stance minutely, her young face showing the kind of concentration that operators spent years developing. 10 more shots, same result, a group that could be covered by a quarter. The laughter had died completely, now replaced by the kind of silence that fell when professionals witnessed something extraordinary. "100 yards!" Roberts said, his voice tight. At this distance, the modified 22 required serious skill to maintain accuracy. Penelope made micro-adjustments for wind that she couldn't possibly have felt in the climate-controlled environment, except she could reading air currents in the way her mother had taught her, feeling the subtle pressure changes that most shooters ignored. 10 shots. The group had opened up slightly to the size of a $50. Colonel Vaughn had moved to the observation window, his expression unreadable. Around him, SEALs who'd qualified as expert marksmen watched a 12-year-old demonstrate skills that had taken them years to develop. But Penelope wasn't finished. "May I try the M4?" she asked Roberts, her voice still quiet, respectful. Roberts looked at Vaughn, who nodded slowly. When the weapon was placed before her, Penelope's hands moved in a blur. She field-stripped the rifle down to its component parts, inspected each one, and reassembled it in 43 seconds. The official SEAL qualification time was 60 seconds, and that was for operators who handled these weapons daily. "How?" someone whispered. "Mom timed me," Penelope said simply, "every morning before school. She said muscle memory was life memory, that hands remembered what minds forgot." She shouldered the M4, adjusting for its different weight and balance. "May I shoot?" What followed was a clinic in advanced marksmanship. Penelope progressed through distances and weapons with the kind of systematic precision that spoke of years of training. Each weapon she handled, M4, M14, finally the M107.50 caliber sniper rifle that most grown men struggled to manage, she treated with the same respectful efficiency. And with each one, she didn't just shoot well. She shot at levels that shouldn't have been possible for someone her age and size. By the time Penelope moved to the long-range sniper platform, the entire base seemed to have heard what was happening. Officers who should have been home for dinner crowded the observation area. Someone had called the base commander, who arrived just in time to watch a 12-year-old girl settle behind a rifle that weighed nearly as much as she did. "This is insane," Vaughn muttered, but he didn't stop it. He couldn't. What he was witnessing had transcended regulations and moved into the realm of the unprecedented. The 500-yard target looked impossibly small through the scope, a dot that would challenge even experienced snipers. Penelope went through her preparation ritual, checking wind flags, making minute adjustments to the scope, controlling her breathing, until her heartbeat seemed to slow. Those watching through spotting scopes saw her transform again, becoming something almost otherworldly in its focus. "She's calculating," Robert said suddenly. "Look at her eyes. She's running ballistics tables in her head." It was true. Penelope's lips moved slightly as she processed variables: wind speed, humidity, barometric pressure, the Coriolis effect that most shooters ignored at this distance, but that her mother had taught her always mattered. She made final adjustments to her scope, then settled into a stillness so complete she might have been carved from stone. The first shot shattered the afternoon quiet. Through the spotting scopes, they saw the impact dead center. Before anyone could react, she fired 4 more times so quickly it seemed impossible she could be re-aiming between shots. But when the electronic scoring system updated, it showed 5 shots in a group that measured less than 2 inches at 500 yards. "That's not possible," someone said flatly. "That's better than match-grade ammunition should allow. That's better than the rifle's mechanical accuracy should permit." But Penelope was already moving to her final demonstration. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph, her mother in uniform smiling at the camera. She placed it where she could see it, then announced quietly, "Mom's record, 1,400 yards, moving target wind, gusting to 20 miles per hour." "Absolutely not," Vaughn said immediately. "That's beyond—" "I'm not trying to match it," Penelope said. "I know I can't. But she always said I should show what I could do, not what I couldn't." She looked at the colonel with those gray eyes that carried too much weight. "Please, just let me try." The range could simulate the shot electronic targets on Track's wine machines to create realistic conditions. It was a scenario they used to humble hotshot snipers to show them how much they still had to learn. Nicole Morrison had been one of only 3 people to successfully complete it in the range's history. Against his better judgment, Vaughn nodded. The range was configured, wind machines activated, creating a chaotic environment of gusting crosswinds. The target, a human silhouette, would move across a 10-meter track at random speeds, simulating an enemy combatant moving between cover. Penelope settled behind the rifle again, but this time something was different. Her hands shook slightly. For the first time since she'd arrived, she looked like what she was, a 12-year-old girl attempting something impossible, carrying the weight of a legacy too heavy for young shoulders. "You don't have to do this," Robert said gently. "Yes, I do," she whispered. "Mom said the hardest shots aren't about distance or wind. They're about shooting when everything inside you is shaking." She wiped her eyes with her sleeve, smearing tears she hadn't let fall until now. She said that's when training matters most. The range fell silent except for the wind machines creating their artificial chaos. Penelope took position behind the rifle, her small frame dwarfed by the weapon system. Through the scope, the moving target seemed to dance in the heat shimmer and wind distortion. At 400 yards over 3/4 of a mile, hitting a stationary target was achievement enough. Hitting one moving through gusting winds was what separated legends from everyone else. Penelope's breathing deepened, finding the rhythm her mother had taught her. "Breathe with the earth," Nicole had said during those early morning sessions. "Feel the planet rotating beneath you. You're not shooting at a target, you're placing a bullet where the target will be when physics brings them together." The first shot missed by inches, the wind pushing the bullet off course. A few SEALs exhaled, almost relieved to see her fail at something. But Penelope was already adjusting her young mind, processing the error, calculating corrections. The second shot was close enough that in combat it would have been effective. On the third shot, everything aligned. The wind died for a fraction of a second, the target's movement pattern revealed itself to her subconscious, and Penelope's trigger squeeze was perfect. The bullet flew for nearly 2 full seconds, arcing through space, pushed and pulled by forces that would have sent it wildly off course without the precise calculations she'd made. The impact was center mass. The range erupted. Hardened operators who'd seen combat on 6 continents shouted like spectators at a championship game. Someone was openly crying. Master Chief Roberts stood frozen, his hand over his mouth, having just witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible. But Penelope wasn't celebrating. She safed the weapon with mechanical precision, then stood on shaking legs. The magnitude of what she'd done, of what she'd been doing for the past 10 minutes, hit her all at once. She wasn't a Navy SEAL. She wasn't her mother. She was a 12-year-old girl who missed her mom and had just performed under pressure that would have broken most adults. 47, someone said in the stunned silence. She broke 47 base records in 10 minutes. Colonel Vaughn moved first, walking onto the range with the careful steps of someone approaching something fragile and precious. He knelt beside Penelope, who was struggling not to cry, and did something that shocked everyone watching. He saluted her. "Your mother would be proud," he said simply. "Hell, she is proud, wherever she's watching from." That broke the dam. Penelope sobbed the weight of 2 years of grief and pressure, releasing all at once. Roberts wrapped the rifle sling around his arm and set it aside, then did what his instincts as a father demanded. He hugged the girl who'd just outshot every special operator on the base. "I just wanted to make her proud," Penelope whispered. "She said the range would understand. She said you'd know what it meant." "We do," Roberts assured her. "We understand exactly what it means." The crowd parted as Rear Admiral Sarah Chen arrived, having broken several traffic laws getting to the base after the first reports reached her office. She took in the scene, the electronic scoreboard showing impossible numbers, the gathered SEALs with expressions of awe, the 12-year-old girl in a pink hoodie who'd just rewritten the record books. "Ms. Morrison," the Admiral said formally, "what you've demonstrated today goes beyond marksmanship. You've shown that excellence can be passed between generations, that legacy isn't just about memory, but about living skill. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The Navy would like to offer you something unprecedented, a civilian youth development program designed specifically for individuals with your unique abilities. You would train here with full access to our facilities while continuing your regular education. Vaughn added, "We'll work with your guardian, ensure you have the support you need. Your mother served with honor, and you've shown that her legacy lives on in the most meaningful way possible." Penelope looked up at the officers surrounding her, these warriors who'd gone from laughing at her to saluting her in the span of 10 minutes. "Can I keep wearing the pink hoodie?" she asked with the ghost of her mother's smile. "You can wear whatever you want," Vaughn said. "You've earned that right and more." The story of Penelope Morrison's 10 minutes on the range became legend throughout the Special Operations community, though officially it remained classified. Unofficially, it sparked a revolution in how the military thought about talent development and legacy skills. The Morrison Youth Marksmanship Program was established within 6 months, identifying and training young people with exceptional abilities while ensuring they maintained normal childhoods. Penelope became its first student and eventually its youngest instructor. By age 14, she was teaching ballistics to SEAL candidates. By 16, she was consulting on sniper training programs throughout NATO. But she remained at heart the girl in the pink hoodie who'd walked into a military office with her mother's notebook and a lifetime of training compressed into her young frame. Colonel Vaughn, who'd initially laughed at her request, became her fiercest advocate and unofficial mentor. He learned the Morrison family history, studying how 5 generations had refined and passed down skills that bordered on the supernatural. He discovered that Nicole had been preparing for her own death training. Penelope, with an intensity born of premonition, ensuring the knowledge wouldn't die with her. The pink hoodie now hangs in the Naval Special Warfare Museum, displayed alongside Nicole Morrison's medals and a plaque listing the 47 records Penelope broke that day. Visitors often assume it's a mistake. Surely a child's clothing doesn't belong among the artifacts of America's elite warriors. But those who know the story understand that excellence doesn't have an age limit, that sometimes the smallest hands carry the biggest legacy. Master Chief Roberts retired 3 years later, but not before establishing the Morrison Scholarship Fund, ensuring that young marksmen from military families could access training regardless of financial circumstances. At his retirement ceremony, Penelope, now 15 and even more deadly with a rifle, gave the keynote speech. "Master Chief Roberts taught me something important that day," she said. "Not about shooting, Mom had already done that. He taught me that strength isn't about being invulnerable. It's about being willing to be vulnerable in front of people who've earned your trust. Every shot I've taken since that day has been easier because I know I'm not carrying my family's legacy alone anymore." The SEALs who'd witnessed her performance that day carried the lesson forward in their own careers. When they became instructors, they looked harder for hidden talent, understanding that skill could manifest in unexpected packages. They told the story in team rooms around the world, not the classified details, but the heart of it, that a 12-year-old girl had walked into their world and redefined what was possible. Penelope's influence extended beyond marksmanship. Her story prompted a DoD-wide review of dependent support services recognizing that military children often carried unique traumas and talents that deserved cultivation rather than neglect. Programs were established at bases worldwide, ensuring that the children of fallen warriors had access to whatever training or support they needed to honor their parents' legacies. The technical data from Penelope's shooting that day revolutionized understanding of marksmanship. Scientists studying the footage and ballistics data discovered that the Morrison family had developed techniques that pushed human performance to its absolute limits. Penelope's ability to calculate wind drift in her head, to feel minute pressure changes to maintain stability. Despite her small frame, all of it was documented and incorporated into advanced sniper training. But perhaps the most profound impact was on Penelope herself. The girl who'd walked into that office carrying grief like a weight learned to transform it into purpose. She grew up to become not just a marksman, but a teacher, a mentor, and eventually a mother who would pass the Morrison legacy to yet another generation. At 18, Penelope was offered direct commission into the Navy as a shooting instructor. She declined, choosing instead to remain civilian while continuing to train military personnel. "Mom was the warrior," she explained. "I'm the teacher. Every generation adds something new to the legacy." Today, Penelope Morrison, at 22, holds every significant marksmanship record in NATO. She's written 3 classified manuals on advanced shooting techniques and trained operators from dozens of allied nations. But she still wears pink hoodies to the range, still carries her mother's notebook, still places that worn photograph where she can see it before difficult shots. In her office at Coronado, the same building where Colonel Vaughn once laughed at her request, hangs a simple frame containing 2 items, her mother's lieutenant insignia and a note in Nicole's handwriting. "Baby girl, they'll doubt you because you're young, because you're small, because you're female. Let the range speak for you. Excellence needs no explanation." Below it, Penelope has added her own note. Excellence doesn't have an age limit. Sometimes the smallest hands carry the biggest legacy, and the quietest voice speaks with generations of thunder. The cycle continues. Somewhere, a child of a fallen warrior is learning to shoot, to fly, to lead, carrying forward skills and values that transcend death. They face the same doubts, the same dismissive laughter, the same assumptions about what's possible. But they also carry the knowledge that one day they too might walk into a room full of skeptics and leave behind a legend. Because that's what legacies do. They transform loss into purpose, grief into greatness, and skeptics into believers, one impossible shot at a time.